In this video, we're going to talk about all the ways you can incriminate yourself before you're ever even arrested or interrogated by the police. My name is Michael Oykhman. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and on my channel, I share information about how to defend your rights in Canada. Most of the time when we're talking about police traps and police interrogation techniques, that happens in the context of someone being arrested, being brought in, and being interrogated by the police in a police station. By that point, people have already been told about why they're under arrest, that they can call a lawyer, and most of the time have already actually called a lawyer. Even in those situations, people still end up giving police confessions despite the advice they get from their lawyer. For more tips about how to survive a police interrogation, check out my other video about the 13 tricks police use to get confessions in the description below. Also, be sure to stick around to the end of the video for practical advice about real-life situations and how to navigate these situations in dealing with police. So what are some of the ways that police can get you to confess without ever placing you under arrest? The first trap is the phone call trap. This is a situation where the police call you out of the blue, they identify themselves as the police, and they start asking you questions about an incident or event that happened. Before you know it, you're answering questions about knowing the person they're talking about or the place they're talking about. You start answering questions about being in the place or at the event where an incident took place. You start giving them more and more information about the actual incident and thereby incriminating yourself. A classic situation is the police calling out of the blue. They say, "Hi, this is Officer so-and-so." And of course, you're answering them because you don't know why they're calling. They ask you if you know why they're calling. If you mention an incident, you're already admitting that you know what they're talking about. Then they ask you about an altercation. "Oh, do you remember such and such an incident on such and such a date?" Yes, I do, officer." You've just incriminated yourself. "And do you remember hanging out with such and such a person on such and such a date?" "Yes, I do, officer." It's too late by then. The officer already got what he needed out of you, and now he's that much closer to arresting you and charging you with a criminal offense. The next trap is the drop-in or the drop-by trap. The police randomly show up, either at your home or at your work or anywhere else they think you might be. The conversation goes very similar to the phone call. "Hi, my name is Officer so-and-so. Do you know why I'm here?" "Yes, I do, officer." Or even if you say, "No, I don't, officer," even by saying that, you've already given them some information, because later on, if you say that you do know why they're there, now they got you on an inconsistency. It could be that simple. But the conversation continues. They say, "Do you know why I'm here? Do you remember such and such an incident? Do you remember such and such a person? Do you remember an altercation occurring?" Whatever your answers are to those questions, you're incriminating yourself in that process. The most common situation that we see occurring with a police drop-by is actually in the context of a traffic collision. It could be that simple. Police often show up at the house and say, "Hi, we got a complaint about a traffic incident. Were you driving on such and such a date? Do you drive such and such a car? Do you mind if we take a look at your car for a minute? What's that paint smudge on your car? Did you have it before? How did it get there?" Any answer you give can be incriminating. By now, you're probably wondering to yourself, well, this can't happen. If the police are gonna ask me these questions or challenge me like this, they have to tell me about my right to counsel. They have to give me my rights. They have to tell me I don't have to talk to them or I don't have to say anything. And that's not entirely true. Here is why this technique works. Your right to counsel is only triggered if your liberty is being restricted. So your right to counsel arises upon detention. You are not detained when the police call you on the telephone. And likewise, you're not detained when the police just randomly show up at your door and ask if they can ask you some questions. This is where they get you. Because you're not detained, because you're not formally arrested and you're not formally charged, they can ask you whatever they want, and it's purely voluntary. And as long as you answer voluntarily, you're in trouble, and the answers you give can be used to incriminate you. And this ties into our third trap the police use to get confessions without ever arresting you or charging you. And this is the voluntary interview trap. It typically starts with either a phone call or a drop-by, but mostly a phone call. And the police will say, "Hey, I'm Officer such and such, and we're investigating an incident on a particular date at a particular time. They might not even mention that. They just want to come and ask you some questions, or better yet, they want you to come see them and they're going to ask you some questions. They just want to clear the air. They just want to clarify some things. They will tell you it is completely voluntary. They'll say you don't even have to come to the police station. Sometimes they'll say they'll meet you at a coffee shop. They'll meet you wherever you want to meet. And they will stress to you that it's completely voluntary. And if you do show up to the meeting, they'll again say, hey, this is completely voluntary. You're not detained. You're not under arrest. You think that they're doing you a favor by saying all that and you feel comfortable and free to leave, but actually what happens is they're ensuring that not only are you not detained expressly from their perspective, but even from your perspective, you don't feel like you're detained. And if you're not detained, you don't get your right to counsel and various other rights that come along with it, and you don't get legal advice before talking to the police. That's the trap. Now that we've explored these common traps, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, yeah, this is totally self-evident. Of course, I'd never fall for that. That totally makes sense. You'd be shocked at how many people fall for that type of police investigative technique. Now you're probably thinking, okay, now that we've flushed this out, what do I do in these situations? How do I deal with it? I don't want to just hang up on the police. I definitely don't want to try to slam the door in their face. I don't want to turn and run if the police show up at my residence or at my work. In fact, that might give them grounds to pursue you and arrest you for something that you never even expected. And you definitely don't want to get into a physical altercation with the police. Well, you might want to get into a physical altercation, but I would highly recommend against doing that. You could be facing a series of other charges that you never even expected, including assault of a police officer, obstruction, resisting, and a myriad of other charges, even if the original investigation doesn't stick. So here are my recommendations for dealing with these real life situations. The trick is to answer the police questions with a question of your own. If it's a police phone call, whether to ask you a question during that phone call or to invite you for an interview, don't answer them directly, but ask your own question. Ask them, what are they calling about? What is their name? And what is the best number to reach them on? Think of how you would respond to a telemarketer. You might not just hang up on them, but you might just say, wait, just interrupt the flow of their questions and say, what are you calling about? What is your name? And what is the best number to reach you on? Then say you will call them back. End the call and call a lawyer. If confronted in person, if they show up at your house or at your work or anywhere else you might be, again, don't answer any of their specific questions, but just ask a question of your own. Just say, wait, interrupt their conversation, interrupt their questioning and say, just wait. I'm sorry, what is your name? What is this about? Okay, what is your contact information? What is the best number to reach you on? Let me write that down. Once you have answers to those three questions, say, I'm sorry, right now is not a good time to talk, but I will call you back or I will get back to you. And again, call a lawyer. Remember, at this point, you're not detained. And the police should reinforce that. But if it's not absolutely clear and you're trying to end the conversation, ask the question, am I being detained? And if the police say, no, you're not, which is what they should be saying, unless they're planning to arrest you anyway, then say, okay, thank you. Again, now is not a good time to talk. Please leave my residence or please let me go on my way and I will get back to you. That's how you politely and respectfully end that conversation without incriminating yourself. It should also be obvious by now that you should not be going to a voluntary police interview, at least not without proper and comprehensive legal advice. So whatever the situation, whether they're asking you to come in person and they're asking you that when they show up at your house or they're calling you about it, again, ask for their name, ask for their contact information, ask what they're calling about, and then say you'll get back to them. Do not just show up at a police interview, even if it's voluntary. If you're tuning in for fun, let me know what you think of this video and other topics you might want me to cover. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where the police want you to come in for a voluntary interview, don't fall for it. Make sure you call us right away. We'd be happy to walk you through the process and explain what we can do to help.